Informatica Powercenter is a service-oriented architecture. It's completely based on service-oriented architecture. So what is meant by service-oriented architecture? Anyone? Service-oriented architecture means you have a lot of services are present. Where the communication between the services, will happen. Where the communication between the services we have by using a TCP/IP protocol. So we have certain protocols are there here where the services, where the client and the server will interact with. So within the Power Center, which is built on service-oriented architecture, we have a lot of services are there. Like for performing the data integration, we have one kind of services. For performing the data quality operation, we have some services. For the web services, we have another set of services are there. So this is completely built on a service-oriented architecture, where the user request the user will request for one thing, and the response will be done by the service, right? So it's a service-oriented architecture which is built on a client-server technology. When I say client-server technology, so you have a client as well as you have a server. You have a client and as well as you have a server. When I say client, so it's nothing but Informatica client. Infra client, and it's a Infra server. Infra server. So within the client we have, so basically when you go with any 9 version of Informatica, it is a combination of, so now you are getting a package of data quality and the Power Center. So previously data quality is a separate license and the Power Center is a separate license. But now we are getting both as a single package. But if you have license on Power Center, you have to use only the Power Center. If you have license on data quality, you have to use only the data quality, but you are not supposed to use the Power Center. So you will get as a package, you will get both, but based on the licensing terms, you have to use only that product itself, right? So for Power Center, you have a separate client tools. You have for Power Center, you have separate client tools are present. So using the Power Center, what do? We perform the data integration. We perform the data integration here, and 4 client tools are present. One is repository manager, designer, workflow manager, and workflow monitor. Okay, so these are the 4 client tools of Power Center. In the same way, you have data quality also. So for data quality, what we have is that we have separate set of client tools are there, which you call it as developer client. So if you observe within the client tools, when I say client, it's like when you go into the R program, Informatica 9.5.1 Infra client tools, there you observe 2 options. One is Power Center client and developer client. So Power Center clients are used to build a data integration process. Developer client is used to build the data quality process. Okay, and you have from 9.5 onward, there is another client tool that came into picture, which is called as Data Transformation Studio. Data Transformation Studio. So what is this Data Transformation Studio is that? So if you have any unstructured data, let's say you have some unstructured data like images, videos are there. and I wanted to convert into the XML format, then this data transformation studio will help me in that. So this is introduced from 9.5.1 onwards, it is coming. So for the prior versions, this data transformation studio is not there. Alright. And you have another set of client tool called as Informatica Analyst. So Informatica Analyst is another client tool where it allows us to perform the data quality operation. So there are two clients there. One is developer client, Informatica Analyst. So using these two clients, we can perform the data quality operation. So these are all the different different client tools that we have, where you can configure within the within the Informatica clients. All right, yes. And you have here server. So how do you access the server? There is another client tool called as another administration client tool called as Informatica Analyst. Sorry, Informatica Administrator. Informatica Administrator. So this Informatica Administrator basically is a admin client tool. It's a admin client tool. So when I say admin client tool, what does it mean? The Informatica Administrator, so we use this admin web-based client tool. So when I say web-based client tool, it's like you can use any web browser in order to open this. It's a admin related web-based client tool where you can manage all the admin related activities. You can manage all the admin related activities within this Informatica Administrator. Okay, and I can open this Informatica Administrator using any of the web browser. I can go into that and configure all the services within the server. I can configure all the services. As I told you, Informatica architecture is completely based on service-oriented architecture. You can configure all the services within the Informatica server by using this Informatica Administrator web-based client tool. So the communication between the Informatica client and the server will be done by using the TCP/IP protocols. So we have TCP or IP protocols are there where you can communicate, where you can, the Informatica server will communicate with the Informatica client. So within the Informatica server, the main component that we have is domain. The main component or the centralized component where you can administer all the activities within the server is called as a domain. So within the domain means, let's say you have a workstation is present, or you have a separate server is there, or a Unix box, whether it is a Unix box or a Windows box. When you are installing Informatica Powercenter in that, you need first of all a database. The prerequisite for installing Powercenter, what is that? You need a database. A database is required. So a database is required, but on which RDBMS you can install? It can be a Oracle RDBMS or SQL Server, or you need DB2. So any of the one of these three databases, any of the one should be present within the server. Any of the one should be present, should be installed within the server. So a database should be configured before installing the Powercenter. So that is the prerequisite. So why do you need this? No, it does not work with MySQL. So only these, only any of these, any of the one within these retail databases, because we can configure. See, it's not like it is not the data warehouse here. It is not the data warehouse. For setting up the Informatica server, we need any of the one license within these three databases. All right. Yes. So why do we need this database is because when you are installing the Powercenter, it will ask you to store the all the domain related data into a database. So you need two schemas here basically. So what are the two schemas? Is like you need a domain schema and a repository schema. So it is always recommended to have both the schemas within a single database, within a separate database. So where the domain related tables will be present in domain schema and repository related information will be present in the repository schema within a single database. So when you install Powercenter within that workstation, so this database has to be priorly present, and a database should be present, and within that two schemas also should be present. So why do you need these two schemas is that, so when you are installing Powercenter, a domain will be set up. When the domain is set up, the metadata tables of the domain will be stored within the domain schema. Alright, yes. So within the domain, we can configure all the services. So basically a domain is nothing but, a domain is it's a fundamental unit. It's a fundamental unit for administering or for administering all the services and nodes. So it's a fundamental unit for administering all the services and nodes. Okay, it's a fundamental unit, and it's a basically group of services and nodes. It's a group of application services and nodes. So we have all the services and the nodes you can configure within the domain. So what is a node here? Again, node is nothing but it's a logical representation of a mission. When I say logical representation of a mission, it means that, let's say, in my mission I have installed Informatica Powercenter. It means that my mission is a node. My mission is a node. So on the node, when I am installing Powercenter, a domain will be set up. A domain will be set up. It's like this. So this is the workstation I have, let's say, or this is the server I have. Alright. So within this server, physical workstation, this is the physical workstation. Or the server. So within this, I have installed Oracle. So Oracle is already present here. So a database is already present. So within the Oracle database, it is like right? Right? A Oracle database is already installed. And within this database, I have two schemas. One is a domain schema. So when I say schema, it is nothing but a database account. Okay. like how we have created a OLTP schema, OLAP schema, and the staging schema. So here also we are going to have two schemas. One is a domain schema, another one is a repository schema. So since we have the database which is a prerequisite already present, I'll go for the Informatica installation. So let's say I have so Informatica installation. Basically, Informatica contains two components. One is server component, or the server installation should be there, and client installation should be also there. So this server installation will be done in this physical workstation. So I'll go here. I have performed the server installation. So who will perform this server installation in the real time? So it's the Informatica administrator is the person who will perform the installation. So he goes here and he comes to this computer and he installs the Powercenter. Let's say he installs in the F drive. Installs in the F drive. Whatever drive it is. So the Informatica is installed. When Informatica is installed here, what does that mean? He is nothing but setting up the domain. He set up the domain. When he is setting up the domain, all the domain related tables will metadata will sit here. All the metadata of that domain related activities will come and sit in this domain database account. So this physical workstation is what you call it as a node. This is what you call it as node. Okay. In the same way, you can have another computer or another workstation. In order to have a better performance or in order to reduce the loading strategy, I have even used Informatica Powercenter here. I have even used Informatica Powercenter. And that is also in Node. Okay. So this is, let's consider this is Node 1 and this is Node 2. So here also you have the same domain also you have set up here. So you have installed this Powercenter into Node 2, right? So this Node 2 I can configure here. So within the Node 1 and Node 2 I can configure within the same domain. When I configure both the nodes within the same domain, one node will be the master gateway node. So let's say this is the master gateway node. When I say master gateway node, it is responsible for receiving all the requests from the Powercenter client. So it will receive the request from the Powercenter client and it will route to the appropriate service. Okay. And when you run, so when you have multiple nodes within the domain, you can configure one node as a master gateway node. And when you run the workflow, let's say you have run the workflow within the workflow manager, and usually it takes you're processing some 50 millions of the data, and usually it is taking some half an hour for that, for processing that. But when you have multiple node concept is there, based on the availability of the resources within the nodes, the work will be split. Means the load will be balanced across two nodes. Whereas, what happens then? The loading time will decrease because you're processing the single workflow within two environments or two nodes, which will reduce the load time. Okay, so this concept is called as the load balancing concept. And you can form grid. So what is in the grid? Grid is basically it's a collection of nodes. Here. All right. So any questions so far? Any questions? Is that clear?
So Venkat, in the real time, do we have two servers then? Multiple servers?
Yes, we may have. It's not a guarantee, but we may have. So it depends upon the amount of data that you have. It depends upon the complexity upon the amount of data. When you have huge amount of data that has to be configured, so we can go for another server. We can go for another server, and we can install Powercenter there, and you can add that server to the domain which you have already present. So when you have multiple domains within a domain, you can share that load. That's it. So that is the only concept that we have. So this concept is called as a grid concept.
Okay.
So basically you have two options that will be present while you are installing. One is create a domain and another one is a join domain. Okay. For the first time when you are creating, when you are performing installation, here, so this is the first workstation, right, where you are installing. So here you will create the domain. So the second one will perform the join domain. So here when you are installing, you perform the join domain. Right? So it means that it will join this domain. It will join this domain. See, within a single physical machine, you cannot configure multiple nodes. You cannot configure multiple nodes. But within a domain, you can have multiple nodes by joining the domain. By clicking on this join domain. So what happens? Here the domain will be set up, but into this domain, this particular node can be added.
Okay. So configuration wise it's same, but it's sharing across the different hardware, right? That's it.
Exactly. Sharing across. The node will be shared. See, sometimes when you are running a workflow, the memory resources or the network resources will be rich in one server. Sometimes it happens. So based on the availability of the resources there, so it will split. The load balancer is the concept we have it. It's a component we with the integration service, because integration service will run the workflow. So load balancer is one of the component within the integration service, which shares the balance according to the resources that are present in the different nodes. Okay, thereby we can minimize the workload. We can minimize the loading time. So that is how you have the grid concept. So you can create a grid across these two nodes. You can create a grid across these two nodes, and on top of this grid, you can create the two services. Okay. So any more questions?
No, I'm good.
All right. Yes. So here the domain is nothing but it's a fundamental unit for administrating and managing all the services on the Powercenter, and where you create this domain on the node, you will create the domain. So node is nothing but it is a logical representation of a machine. Logical representation of a machine. So you have two kinds of nodes are present. When you have multiple nodes concept, you have two kinds of nodes are present. One is a master gateway node, and another one is a worker node. So master gateway node basically it receives the request and shares the request to all the worker nodes and routes that request to the appropriate service. Okay, right. So within the domain, as I told you, it's a collection of nodes and the services. So when you talk about the services, when you talk about the application services, you have a multiple number of services are present within the domain, where you can configure within the domain on the node. So what are the services? For data integration, we have separate set of services. For data quality, you have separate set of services, and you have another services for different operations, right? So for data integration, in order to perform the data integration, so we need two mandatory services called as a repository service and integration service. Repository service and the integration service. For performing the data quality, we need two services called as model repository service, and data integration service. Like how you can configure even the Informatica analyst also is another service that you have. Informatica Analyst Service, right? So you have listener service, web services you have, yes, logger service. So like how you have different services are present. Okay, so for performing the data integration operation, we need these two services has to be created. For performing the data quality, we need these two services, or this service can be configured, and these services are for some other operations. Okay, so what is this repository service? So basically, if you observe in the last class, when you wanted to create any ETL, first of all we have logged into repository service. So this repository service is created within the domain. So the first service okay, that we have to configure is the repository service. And another service that can be configured is that it's a integration service, okay, for performing the data integration. In the same way, if you want to perform the data quality, we need these two services has to be present. So what are the services? Model repository service and the data integration service. So when these services are created, you can configure these services within the clients. Otherwise, you cannot perform any data quality operation. So in the same way, once you create these two services within the domain, these services has to be configured within these client tools. Otherwise, it is of no use. You cannot work on creating the ETLs. Okay, so these 4 client tools, within these client tools, you have to configure these services. For performing the data quality, this service has to be configured within the developer client. Let's say if you want to perform the data quality within the Informatica Analyst tool, then you have to configure this service within the domain. Okay, so based on what operation you want to do, you basically have to create the service first. You have to create the service first, configure that service within the client tool. That is all we have to perform. Okay, so here you have these two services are the mandatory services for the Powercenter. So our agenda for this training is to understand how the Powercenter is working. So I'll go with the Powercenter architecture now. So within the domain, let's say I have created two services here. Within the domain, I have created two services. One is integration service and the repository service. So these two services will be again have the communication by using the TCP or the IP protocols, right? TCP or the IP protocols, we have it. So when you are setting up this repository service within the domain, we will have to give this repository connection details. This repository schema is there, right? We have to give these details while you are installing while you are configuring the repository service. Because when you configure this repository service, basically 501 database objects will be created. Okay, sorry, 511 database objects. When I say database objects, 511 tables and views are created. 511 tables and views are created. So why do you have to give this repository database connection or the repository schema connection? Is that when you do any kind of operation, so where do you configure this repository service? You configure this repository service within the client tools, right or wrong? See, if you want to perform any data integration operation, if you want to perform any mapping, first of all you will have to log in at any cost into this client tools. So when you log in into that client tools, you can actually create all the ETLs. When you are creating the ETLs within the client tools, when you save it, every time the repository service will store that metadata of that object into the repository database. Let's say you have imported the source definition. So what is the first thing that you do? You create the folder. When you create the folder, when you save it, the repository service will pick that metadata into the repository database. That is the reason you have all the repository tables are present here. Understand? So let's say you have created the table called as, folder called as sales. You have created a folder called as the sales. So when you click on save, the repository service, which acts as the interface between the client and the repository database, it will bring that sales metadata and it will store that sales metadata into this repository database. Alright, you have a separate tables for storing that. So that is the reason you have 511 tables or views are present. Right, so next thing, what you do, you go into the designer, you will import the source definition. When you save it, let's say you have imported a source definition called as invoice. When you save it, what happens? The repository service will again insert this metadata into the repository database. This will be there. And what is the next thing that you do? Import target definition. This is like invoice underscore HTG. Again, what happens? This will be again stored into the repository database. And you create a mapping. So let's say the mapping name is invoice load. Again, what happens when you save it? This is the metadata that will be again inserted into this repository database. Means whenever you perform the save, the repository service will insert that metadata into the repository database. Likewise, you create the session, you create the workflow. What happens? It will store this metadata into the repository database, into the repository tables that we have within the repository schema. So why do you have to store these things there? Things is that whenever you wanted to, so basically if something crashes, when the software has crashed or let's say the system has crashed, at that time you need to have the you need to take the backup of this repository. So that when you're reconfiguring the Powercenter or when you're reinstalling the Powercenter, you can use the same backup in order to handle the system recovery. So here this database objects will always be present. You have them within the separate database within the database server, and so this will be used to store all the metadata. So this is nothing but a metadata. Sales is a metadata, invoice is a metadata, invoice underscore HTC is a metadata, right? So this is called as a metadata database or the repository database. We can call it by any name. So let's say you have created the session in the workflow and you wanted to run it. When you run that when you run this workflow within the workflow manager, so where do you run that workflow? You run basically the workflow within the workflow manager or the workflow monitor. So who is going to run the workflow? The integration service is the one that will run so it manages the connectivity. With the workflow manager and the workflow monitor. When you run the workflow within the Powercenter, within the workflow manager, then the integration service it takes the metadata. When you run it, it basically takes the metadata like what is the workflow name, what is the session name, what is the mapping, what is the sources and the target. Yes, all this metadata, it will take the help of repository service in order to get that information from the repository database. So it will get first of all the information of that workflow, right, from the repository database, and then it performs the data integration from source to the target. From source to the target, it will perform the data integration. Right? So the integration service is like a ETL engine. It is a ETL engine that performs the activity of ETL process. Alright. So in order to connect to this repository database, we have some native drivers, right? So native drivers means when I say native drivers, it is like when I say native drivers, it is like for each database you will have the drivers will be present. So using the drivers, it will connect to the database and it will start storing the repository content. Okay, so this is the architecture of the Powercenter. See here, when you are working on the data quality, you will set up these two services. So for the data quality also, you have a separate database should be required. So where it contains all the metadata. It's the same thing. It is the same thing. But here, when you see this client tools, basically these client tools are like there are two kinds of client tools are there. One is thick clients. When I say thick clients, it needs the installation. Means when you wanted to work on this Powercenter client, you need the installation. So installation is nothing but a thick client. And you can see Informatica Analyst for this is a thin client. When I say thin client, it is like you do not require any installation for this. You just need any of the browser. Okay. So this is the architecture of the Powercenter. Yes.